Paige, what you've been through would shake the foundation of anyone's life. You were trying to survive trauma with no safety net. That's not a fair fight. What you've been through is not just stress. That's displacement. That's survival mode. That's trauma on top of trauma. You're someone who has been deeply hurt, repeatedly dismissed, and then punished for having normal trauma responses. People blaming you for the chaos is one of the most painful and unfair patterns that happens to trauma survivors, especially those with CPTSD. And it's not because you caused the chaos. It's because you were the most visible person reacting to an environment that was already chaotic. You weren't too much. You weren't the problem. You were in danger, and you did what any human being has to do when danger closes in. You got out. When you finally couldn't tolerate the danger anymore, you became the problem because you disrupted the family's denial. CPTSD doesn't destroy relationships. Silence, misunderstandings, fear of vulnerability, and other person's inability to show up do. What you're describing is one of the deepest wounds trauma survivors carry. Not just the harm itself, but the way people around you refuse to see it, and how it is responsible for your perceived character changes. But people who don't want to face their own responsibility will always point to the person who is visibly hurting and say, "See? They're the issue." It makes the world feel hollow, unsafe, and unfamiliar. You are not impossible to love. You are not too much. You are not unworthy of support. You simply haven't had enough people who were capable of meeting you where you were. When you say you've lost your son, your friends, your family, that's not just loss. That's a kind of emotional extinction event. And now you're in a new place, without the familiar anchors, without people who should have stood beside you. That kind of isolation hits differently when you already carry trauma. You're not being dramatic. You're not exaggerating. You're not imagining things. You're someone who has been deeply hurt, repeatedly dismissed, and then punished for having normal trauma responses. You were abandoned because the people around you never took the time, or had the capacity, to understand what you were carrying. And when people misunderstand trauma, they fill the gaps with the easiest, laziest explanations. She's dramatic. She's overreacting. She's the problem. Your fear, your overwhelm, your hypervigilance, your need for safety, those were responses to trauma. But instead of asking, "What happened to you?" they asked, "What's wrong with you?" Hypervigilance looks like irritability. Emotional overwhelm looks like drama. Withdrawal looks like coldness. Dissociation looks like disinterest. Fear looks like anger. They saw the symptoms and assumed they were the new you. When people avoid your pain, they end up avoiding you. They treat your trauma responses like personality traits. They treat your fear like drama. They treat your survival instincts like flaws. They treat your wounds like choices. You learned to brace yourself. You learned to expect rejection. You learned that opening up leads to being labeled dramatic or changed. You learned that your pain scares people away. Those lessons came from unsafe, emotionally limited people. Right now, your system is saying, "I can't survive another loss." And that's a valid feeling. But it doesn't mean you're doomed to be alone. It means you need safety, consistency, and gentleness before you can risk letting anyone in again. I hear the weight in what you just said. When you've lived with CPTSD for a long time, especially when the symptoms were misunderstood or dismissed, it can feel like the condition itself pushed everyone away. But that feeling, as real as it is, isn't the full truth. CPTSD symptoms: hypervigilance, emotional overwhelm, shutdowns, distrust, withdrawal, are survival responses. They're not character flaws. They're not moral failings. They're not evidence that you're destined to be alone. You made an incredibly brave choice. You removed yourself from an abusive situation. You protected your own life. You did what the people around you should have. Emotionally grounded, patient, compassionate people don't run from CPTSD. They don't get scared off by symptoms. They don't punish you for being wounded. They don't abandon you when you're struggling. You deserved people who saw the pain behind the reactions you didn't get. And that's a tragedy. But it's not a verdict on your future.